This one might be amp of the year, under $3, $4, maybe even $500, and it's likely one that you haven't even heard of. This is the 3E Audio A7 stereo amp. To give you the 10-foot view on it, it gives you basically all the necessary things, or at least highly desired features on a small amp like this. You get 3 input types, auto-sensing signal to power on and off the amp, great measurements, and even a volume bypass. Plus a couple more things that we're going to get into during the review here. So this one is built by 3E Audio. They're new to producing finished amps like this, but they're totally not new to the amplification space by a long shot. They sell a number of really good DIY boards, as well as I believe serve as a vendor of boards and other products like DSP chips for some of the other larger manufacturers. And I think it really shows. This isn't necessarily a looker when it meets your eye, but it's certainly a worker. Touching on features and usability before my sound review, if you want to see measurements, there's a few out there that are really good. It's covered pretty extensively, but basically to summarize it, it measures fantastically, a little ahead of the competition that we've been seeing in 2024 from a lot of the budget brands. What I want to focus on is really kind of, the usability, what it's like to actually use this. Products can measure great, and that's really good to know. But if the usability is flawed or there's downright issues with the product, I want you guys to know about it. A little secret on this one though, there's not a lot of negatives coming here. I'm pretty impressed with this one. I'm really happy to get this review out to you guys. So like I mentioned, this one does function with that auto on, auto off. If it senses input, it turns on. If no input after I believe 5 minutes, it turns off. Ignore the trigger in the corner here. You did not see this. It's a pre-production unit and it's being dropped for the auto on-off features. I can also note that the auto sensing features actually work pretty well here. Just think of it kind of like a sub in auto mode. They go into standby after a few minutes, or 5 in this case. And then once it senses a signal, it powers on. It's not instant, but it's a very minor delay that I don't think is going to cause you any inconvenience. Most importantly, I didn't experience any strange behavior, such as turning on randomly while it's off, or even loud popping noises through the speakers as it cycles power. You might get a slight noise when it kicks on, but it's honestly nothing worth noting. I didn't see it as a problem. Most of us are pretty familiar with this configuration on subs, and I can't say I've ever heard anyone complain about it. Sure, there might be a reason or two for a physical trigger, where it would be beneficial here, but dropping that in favor of something like keeping the auto on off, that's fine with me. In some ways, it is superior. If you forget to turn something off, your amp isn't going to be powered on for days. 5 minutes, off it goes. Here's the volume knob front and center. It also serves as the input selection between the RCA, XLR, and TRS. As I mentioned, you get those 3 options. Or just hold it to power cycle the amp. You can also forget the volume knob altogether and run this in bypass mode. That's my preferred method, as this one doesn't have a remote. If a volume bypass is unfamiliar to you, it's basically just changes this to strictly a power amplifier. It's fixed at full volume. All the volume control duties are passed on to a preamp streamer, things like that. Take note of that, because the last thing you want to do is have your preamp cranked to 11 and turn this on while it's in bypass mode. Ask me how I know. Yeah, that woke me up. That actually happened to me when I initially set this up. I was sort of in a rush. Another reviewer asked me to check something on mine, so I quickly connected it, powered it on. Surprise! Honestly though, for best performance, enabling the bypass is the way to go. You get a more direct signal route. For best performance, use the balanced connections to a preamp of your choosing. You're going to squeak out a little bit of a cleaner signal with this configuration. The single-ended connection's fine too. Ideally, keep the RCA in low gain mode if possible, and just send it. If you do send it a little too hard, you'd never do that, right? There is actually a clipping light on this one. They took advantage of some of the 3255 offerings that no one else really seems to be taking advantage of, at least from the usual budget options that we've been seeing, Daimas, Fozzies, Dukes, all that kind of stuff. So I think we have really adequate venting on this one. Plenty of cutouts on the side here, as well as the chip mounted upside down in the case. You can see it a little bit if you look through the case here in the cracks. It's a bit of a unique configuration that seems to work really well to keep the temps down. I had this running for hours and the temps never reached anything that would draw alarm to myself. I'm going to open this one up in a second here, but before that, taking a look at the bottom, we can also see 2 cutouts. It's the first time I've seen this, and no, it's not for finger warming or manual voltage checking. It's actually for simple op-amp swapping without having to take apart the entire case. Generally, these come apart in about 1 minute anyways and require roughly 1 to 2 tools, so it's not a big deal either way. This design looks like it's going to be able to handle op-amps of all sizes. We might as well open this one up and see what we run into. And now we have to deal with the always stressful but not really stressful. Did they forget the thermal paste? Most have it, but alarmingly, I've had more than one amp come in from brands that have missed it. And as you can see here, it's all good. We've been properly pasted. You can see the capacitors, flat wire inductors, and op amps scattered throughout this one. The two TPA 3255 chips covered by this heatsink here. The single op amp over here is going to be for the single-ended to balance conversion. Generally, people are going to be more focused on the pair down here. These are the OPA 1656 op amps. I'm not going to rile up the masses with an op amp subjective review today, but I do want to let people interested know what does fit here. The Bursons are typically a struggle on desktop size gear. I've actually only been able to get them to fit in the Fosi ZA3 DAC before this. Most of the cases just aren't quite tall enough, but the A7 can accommodate them with ease, and as the Burson fits, the Sparkos has no issues either. The Sparkos just generally fits in cases a little bit easier than the really tall Bursons. If you go down the op amp swapping trail, just make sure to install them in the correct orientation and you're good to go. There's usually a simple notch you can key in on for the proper fitment. Install them the wrong way and you can expect to let the magic smoke out, but in all honesty, really, these are pretty simple. I also want to point out the options I have here are considered premium and sort of don't line up with the pricing of this amp, but if you want to experiment with it, go wild. The Boat Anchor, power supply, is a 48 volt 10 amp. It's no joke. This is a large power brick, but it does allow this little beast to output 250 watts per channel at 4 ohms at 1% THD and around 140 watts per channel at 8. So it's kind of a serious little amp. This A7 is somewhat in line with some of the other offerings out there today as far as power, but a bit ahead of them when you look at the design and the implementation. I should also note that you can get this with other smaller power supply options such as a 48 volt 5 amp, which could save you a significant amount of coin if you have speaker pairings that may not require as much power. I was sent the 48 volt 10 amp, so that's what I'm going to use as far as the review today, and that's what my thoughts are going to be based on. Getting into my personal thoughts on the sound on this one, equipped with that 48 volt 10 amp power supply, just want to clarify that again so you have an idea on the power output. It drove the CSS 1TDX speakers really well, and that can be a bit of a demanding speaker, most notably in the bass department. Smaller amps can come up a bit short with this speaker. It's a speaker that scales really well as you bring up the power, so it makes some of these evaluations easier based on its performance. With this pairing, it came across as clean and controlled. The power, really shining through in the bass department. The bass control was really excellent here. These speakers can put out a serious low note for their size, and the A7 did admirably well at this price point. If you've tried any of the Fosi or AIYA amps that have came out in the last year, at least the good ones, this A7 ticks some subjective boxes just a bit higher for me. Honestly, I liked it more. It's not going to be a night and day difference by any means, as some of these budget amps have really come to play in 2024, but I simply enjoyed the delivery on this one a little bit more. The design is a little more advanced and appears they took some of their prior experiences in the DIY boards and really delivered a well thought out amp here at a, I would say, reasonable price. I'm curious if it's their PFFB implementation that is making all the difference for me here, or if it's just something going on with the more substantial board design. Really, no matter how they're pulling this off, the important part is I do really like it. These have a great sound and from my observations appear to match up really well with a lot of speakers. I could see these being really popular with the WEAM Ultra crowd. It might be the best measuring and sounding, in my opinion, amp for this price point. If you have any thoughts on some others outside of the usual suspects from AIYA, Fosi, let me know down below. The only knock I really have on this product is the general look and casework. The performance was great, and I really don't have anything negative to say about it. It has the right features, it has plenty of power, and most importantly, it didn't suffer from featureitis, where you have a good product that can stand on its own 2 feet, but you decide to implement all sorts of features that aren't necessary, like a passive sub-channel. Sometimes these extras even function poorly. So you can take a good product and in some ways you can, degrade it by adding too many features. The A7 here just does what it intends to do, proudly saying, I am me, without trying to be the next Mr. Gadget. As for the case, it's fine and it works as intended. It's just a tad bit utilitarian. It's a good sign for a product when the only thing I'm picking on is the general look of it. And if it keeps the price in line, I can appreciate that as well. I guess if you were to drag something out of me, I'd put a high pass filter on here. A lot of these are going to be connected to a bookshelf speaker along with a sub. That ability to control the deeper frequencies is going to benefit everyone. I guess The other option here is just slap this together with a Weem Ultra and have a complete front end of your system for around $600. That'll take care of the high pass filter and basically anything else. If you guys, gals, are shopping for the $200 to $400 price point for a simple amplifier, I think this could fit the bill for a lot of people. It's an easy recommendation, really. I do wish these were available on Amazon, as it eases the mind for a lot of people with a simple return process. But from what I gather, they are working on that. Right now it's available on AliExpress, which shouldn't treat you wrong. I've ordered from there multiple times before, without any issues. This one will work on a desktop with its small size and power basically anything you throw at it near field. But it can just as easily move to the larger spaces. The sense of control and power was best felt on bookshelves, where you really shouldn't run into any limitations on these. Floor standing speakers performed admirably as well, but always consider the sensitivity on the speaker requirements, and most importantly, your room when pairing an amp to a speaker. If you're still making awkward eye contact with me at this point, please consider throwing a like, comment, or even subscription my way. We made it through 2024 and really grew the community a significant amount. I appreciate all the support and look forward to bringing you some interesting reviews in 2025. See ya. Take care.